name's McLeish, and there's two things that I do really. In my sort of daytime life, I work in the technology and information industry, in the library world specifically. And what I do in my spare time is to operate in a distributed global movement called the Zeitgeist Movement. Broadly speaking, seeks to change the sort of fundamental value system that our kind of global culture is based on, from one of sort of, overconsumption and unsustainability to one of actual sustainability and sort of technological progress. So I run those two side by side, and they intersect every now and again, but I'd imagine one would pay me not to do the other. So this movement is essentially a social movement. It's easier to describe what it isn't really. It's not a political movement. We don't really recognize politics as a viable option in addressing the issues that we talk about. It's a voluntary social movement, really, a grassroots social movement that centers on actual sustainability. We seek a reorientation of two major elements of society. One is a very, very simple one to understand. We need a society that functions on a physical level, that actually has advanced, intelligent, automated to the most degree that you can, systems to enable efficient transport, efficient energy usage, efficient land usage. Part of our understandings are that we need sustainable city systems, very much like those spoken about in the Venus Project or by Buckminster Fuller or many other futuristic city planners. So that's sort of the first level, is we understand that Earth is a finite resource. Earth is actually entirely a resource. We think about wave and wind and tide. It's in fact one thing. This is the resource we're on. This is the rock that we're on that's hurtling through space. And we need to live on it. We need to continue to live on it, and as well as possible. And we understand also that a divided society, where there are a lot of poor people, people suffering, people who can't get nourished or educated, isn't really a functioning society at all, and will actually negatively impact those people who are seemingly doing well in that society as well. You can see from works by people like Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett from the University of Nottingham, in their comparison of the ratio of difference between the top 10% and the bottom 10% of people in society according to their relative wealth, that the most divided societies in that sense are the ones with the most stress, the highest rates of murder, incarceration length, number of prisoners, number of prisons, obesity levels, and even things like innovation levels are actually higher in more equal societies. Funnily enough, it's not absolute wealth. Even societies where the poorest are not as poor as another society where they're more equal in a ratio term do worse than the ones that are more equal. So even if the lowest 10% have or a higher income, that absolute doesn't actually correlate with the equality, if you like. We understand that the basic value associations of our societies are in need of a transition as well. Human beings absolutely require certain things. We require food, we require clothing, we need somewhere to stay, we need, if you like, land, we need a home, we need clean air to breathe, we need clean water to drink, we need all of those things. So really, it only makes sense to really start redesigning a new system based on those things, based on this is what we absolutely require at the core of our system. And then we can build out and see what other wonderful things we can get, which are very wonderful, like art and culture and all those kinds of things, and music. We propose, and I specifically propose, a resource-based economy, an economy where we first understand, in order to have a functioning society, and that is a global one, we are one human race, we are all brothers and sisters in a very literal genetic sense. We need to employ technology to absolutely serve man, if you like. Evidently, the monetary system has come to an end. It was very useful for a while. I've not been anti-money in all of history. It's changed its usage in the history. You can't be blanket anti-money and still understand the history of money, because it changes all the time. But we've obviously come to the end of that paradigm now, because now it isn't serving us anymore. And that was the goal to begin with. It was to ensure that there was enough labor, so there are enough resources, so that we have the system, so that people are okay. And now that we have technology that can really automate a great part of what we do and really do a great deal that used to require money that doesn't anymore. And now that money is obviously being abused in this sort of debt for more debt cycle, and it's having massive consequences on the environment and on whole peoples, evidently there's no argument. We have to move to one that sustains life. So with those basic understandings, we seek a transition out of the sort of mishmash, accidentally interconnected system we have now into a global, unified, what we call resource-based system.
I wonder why I advocate the Zeitgeist Movement.
The way that we really differ is that I have not yet really seen a social movement of our size, because we have more than 500,000 members, that goes really right back to the root cause. Often people will say it's greed. Oh, it's human greed, it'll never change. So what we have to do is limit it with lots of laws, all those kinds of things. Or in the case of, for example, people like Greenpeace, who do incredibly important work and are really established and are very valuable, they still rely on donations. They still don't see, I think, to the same degree that we do, that in fact the socio-economic system at its fundamental level is the problem, and that we really have to revise it. And I also don't see really anybody talking about it on a global level. The understanding that in fact all these patchwork things that we pick out, like to petition for this awful law, which are all problems, are all in fact at some level, at the greatest level really, have a common root cause in the increasing socio-economic stress of our time. So that's what I would say. On an organizational level, there's another way that we're different as well. We don't have a sort of leadership structure. That doesn't really exist. I, for example, am fairly prominent, I suppose, in the movement, but I wasn't elected. I just one day started writing stuff and delivered it. So I don't report to anyone in that sense. And I don't get told what to say or do either. I communicate actually on a very minor level with the rest of the movement. So the structure of the movement is actually very much like the internet is, in that it is a distributed collective that have chapters. We do have location-based chapters, and we have a forum, for example, on the internet, and we have events where people come together. But these are all created very much out of individuals, and individuals organize them. And so far it seems that they very much want to, because the global event days that we have 300, 400 parallel events around the world in different time zones. I haven't seen that kind of social engagement before on the, at one side, really going right back and addressing the root causes of the socio-economic model, understanding how money works, understanding how politics must work within a monetary system, understanding how the environment works in the sense of how it affects us. And on the other side, the way that we choose to communicate that information, how we are structured, how we inform each other and keep up to date with each other. I think we're probably the first real internet movement in that sense. We are sinking pretty much as quickly as everybody else into this debt spiral, which is exacerbated by more bailouts. And from 2008 till now, it's become very, very clear to a lot of people that when we talk about bailing out, it isn't actually bailing out. What's happening is that money value is being sort of deselected from social life systems. So if that's healthcare, which is pretty much going to be privatized over the next few years, very, very carefully and slowly so that no one notices it. Or if that's pensions, which are devaluing as more debt is created, which means more inflation, which means the original value of the pension just dives. Or there is no way for me to gain an education anymore. And just to extend that point on a short level, recently we've seen a more than exponential increase in the cost of, for example, going to university. People who graduated this year have 25 grand debt, and the people who are going to be starting this year will have more than 40 grand debt. So you're seeing the inability to be educated now on a basic fiscal level. And those people who do go in inherit a huge amount of debt. And I also see that there is a gradual shift away from thinking that we're an island, sort of the kind of island mentality of, well, we're limited, we're not Europe, we're not the world. Greece's bailout won't affect us in some way. I think there's gradually a move by people to realize that when we talk about British society or the British economy, we're actually having to factor in the world state, whether that's the world economy in terms of monetary economics, or whether it's the state of the environment, or whether it's any of those things. I think people are starting to expand outwards. The real acceleration may have begun with deliberate Thatcherite dogma, for example, that level of the government's behavior towards life systems, towards those kinds of things. That was the hyper-privatization time. Now, there's some good things that happened during that time, but a lot of the values that were espoused by that were very much not egotistical, but selfish and gain and hyper-ownership. Where it started to get covert and a little bit more tricky was Labour getting in '97. When that party was bought and sold, basically, it was bought out and corporatized very, very quickly, then I think the acceleration towards not being able to work out what was going on and what the direction of the government actually was really came to the fore. That's when it started to really gain traction, because now we were operating under a sort of political dogma or a political rhetoric, if you like, that sought to seem the opposite of what it was doing, more so than in the deliberately capitalist, ownership-based Thatcherite, Reaganite years. I think what's happened now, after those two great segments in political history, in at least modern political history, is that the social system is now breaking down enough to the point where people are realizing that it doesn't matter who I vote for, it's the entire system of turning up once every 4 years and voting for someone who you have no control over afterwards, who changes their mind, who breaks their promise, and that in fact that is almost entirely separate. That whole process is completely separate to what I need on a day-to-day basis, and to what I require and what the nation requires, or indeed the world requires, in order to operate as a proper society. And now that we're seeing the erosion of pensions actually have an effect on the people who are now retiring, there's this kind of gradual tendency towards proper breakdown, whether it's access to education or healthcare or clean water, those kinds of things. I do see declining.
Some of the people who ought to be paying taxes so the cuts aren't so bad.
I have a lot of friends who live outside of Britain, and one thing that's always pointed out is that they can't believe what the tabloid press is like over here. Now, it's not all bad. Things like the BBC, things like The Guardian, The Independent are pretty good. They run some incredible stories. The Guardian was one of the few newspapers, along with the BBC, that really ran things like Greg Palast's uncovering of the 2000 election being stolen. They ran with that when, for example, the American media didn't. However, it is shrinking. I think that the overall effect of the whole media is quite a sort of infotainment, degenerate simplification of everything, whether it's crime or whether it's the economy or whether it's anything like that. It's very oversimplified. We also have an astonishing tendency towards celebrity in this country. We really revel in this celebrityification, if you like, this deification of what isn't even people who are able in a certain way anymore. They're just reality TV stars now. They are ordinary people, and it's their ordinariness that's being sold as so extraordinary. So I see that taking over and actually crowding out a lot of what the media should be doing, which is to really get to the basis of what is newsworthy, and what is newsworthy has got to be what is actually affecting all of us. So I do see a sort of a merging of the entertainment industry and the newspapers. But I do want to also reiterate, there are very positive things about the British media. It's not all bad. I still think that the BBC, even though it's not perfect, has some astonishing journalistic ability. People like Jeremy Paxman and Newsnight, you never see questions asked that forcefully, or indeed that many times in a row.
To speculate how much
No. I invite you to speculate. In fact, more than speculate, tell us how much it would cost.
Let me invite you to be bought
Give us a figure.
by the bus.
Give us a figure.
And
Come on.
I think when you look at the
Come on.
prospect that this offers
What
London.
is the
They will-
figure?
well, the average cost of a bendy bus is about £2.
Sorry,
And
am I not
certainly-
making myself
and certainly-
clear? What
no,
we want to know is
certainly-
how much you propose to spend on this new
As I say,
fleet
it
of
will be
Routemaster buses.
no more,
A figure.
and no less
A figure.
than the cost of the mail.
I despair.
500.
It is interesting if you decode some of what we consider to be the real leading journalists. If you decode some of the talk that they have, you can see that there's a strange bias going on. Journalists, just like anybody else, are what we might refer to as victims of culture. They are informed by the same zeitgeist, if you like, as everybody else. And so the general biases that are sort of above whichever newspaper you're writing for seem to persist within various newspapers. For example, who is actually questioning the fractional reserve lending system or debt creation in this society at all in the papers? You don't read that. So that might be the first limit to why there is a sort of a quite narrow scope to what is spoken about in the media. It might not be the journalists themselves, it might be the pre-programming of their particular mindset or indeed the filtering of their process. And on the other side, it's strange as well that the debate never really gets down to root causes. I don't see that with anyone. And I find that quite despairing, that we don't even analyse beyond a very short-term future. I'll give you a very concrete example of somebody who's a very good journalist and who's very, very well-read and does some very good arguments. George Monbiot, when Japan's nuclear meltdown happened, it was quite surprising to see how pro-nuclear he was. Now, he had slightly different reasons than others, but any human being who is really looking at the basic effects of nuclear accidents, whether they happen once a year or whether they happen once in every 50 years, would understand that that kind of long-term damage must be avoided at all costs, and therefore nuclear is off the table straight away, surely, at least in that very basic understanding. The media on one side are in fact mostly paid to uphold the status quo, and the status quo right now is nuclear power. There are huge vested interests. The energy industry generally is hugely vested in its own business, and that's partly economics, and it's also partly the fact that you are established means you have to carry on being established. You are in that system now, and that feeds through the media and educates the people, and of course the people then spit out what they think they've heard and what they believe is accurate. But there seems to be either a programming or a general bias towards the way that societies work that does come out in even the most liberal and most understanding and most socially attuned people, like Monbiot. His work is very important. I don't think these are bad people. I think that they are limited very much like a prisoner is limited by the confines of his cell. He's not a bad prisoner for not taking an 8-mile walk every day. He can't do it. The environment, the physical constraints of you being a prisoner or you being a journalist have their limitations built in to the very work that they do and the very slot in society that they sort of fit into.
That's all for Newsnight tonight. Martha's being punished for some offence in a previous life by presenting tomorrow's programme. In the meantime, it's all available again on the website, along with our editor's pathetic pleas for you to send some of us your old bits of home movie and the like, so we can become the BBC's version of Animals Do the Funniest Things. Good night.
I'd like to start this week with a request, and this one goes out to the followers of the 3 Abrahamic religions, to the Muslims, Christians and Jews. It's just a little thing really, but do you think that when you've finished smashing up the world and blowing each other to bits and demanding special privileges while you do it, do you think maybe the rest of us could sort of have our planet back?
At the moment, obviously, we're in an extremely religious world. I don't think it's the same in every country. Some countries are more secular than others in terms of their sort of dominant discourse. But what I see at the moment really is that while many religions espouse wonderful, virtuous ideals, the real way it's being employed by people against people is quite divisive. You can't operate as a human being in the world, in my view, correctly if you believe that 90% of the rest of the world is evil. And so that's the sort of effect that I see of religion. Now that's very different to the central values that get espoused by many religions, especially if you compare the Eastern religions to the Western religions. There's some wonderful philosophical points about what it means to be human and what it means to care for others and why, the golden rule, all of this stuff is hugely valuable. But when it comes to actually operating, when it comes to actually being a human in society, what does it actually do? What does religion actually do, apart from maybe foster a sort of a vague sense of hope or meaning about your life because you weren't just created, as is always asserted, by accident? I've many religious friends. I have a semi-religious family. There are a few religious people. I myself am a former Christian. When I really drill them for why it is that they believe what they do, which I don't think was ever done to me, I don't think anyone ever posed me that question, when I really spend hours going down to the nuts and bolts of why, in the face of the evidence that we have that contradicts a huge amount of their religious text, it always comes down to, well, I don't want to feel that it's a random world, because that somehow fosters a feeling of a lack of control. I see that a lot of sort of religious beliefs are born of a need for comfort, I think, in the world. It operates on an individual level, all of religion, to foster this kind of sense of well-being and this sense of wonder at the bits of the world that we can't explain. That's usually lumped in with spirituality. But in the way that it's employed on a social level, I think it's very much used to keep people indoctrinated into their value system, because it does foster a very strong sense of belonging, religion, and it coalesces a large number of people into a group, whether that's a particular church or a particular denomination, or whether it's a particular nation even. It's to appeal to the masses, to either galvanize votes, which is done very much in the US and is done very much in the UK. And in Germany still there's the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union. They still call themselves the Christian Democratic Union, even if they may be operating without Christian values in the real sense of caring for others. It is used to sort of galvanize and control, basically, on one level, despite the wonderful values it has as its center. I think really the transition in practical terms to a new model that doesn't use economics the way it is now is going to be through a combination of social pressures. It'll be increasing unemployment that makes people reevaluate what employment means in terms of how they interact with society and what it does for them. Being a nation that's quite small, we are a very small nation, some 62 million people is a lot of people, but we're a very physically small landmass, and we're surrounded by water. We rely very heavily on either intensive agriculture or indeed imports and exports, mostly imports really in terms of our food. And I do think that we're going to see, in some sense, the poisoning of our food as an issue. And on the other side, the price of the food is going to keep going up. And on the third side, the realization that we are very, very much dependent upon a landmass that isn't part of our country for the imports of our food. And of course, changes in buying patterns are going to mean that companies start suffering as well. Now, that's going to be prolonged because the whole goal of things like supermarkets and hypermarkets is to make things so cheap that you annihilate the competition and that farms close down, that we're essentially selling as a separate business. So that will go on longer as people become more cost conscious about what they can buy. I think that will slow down, but it's going to happen anyway. Food will continue to become more expensive. More generally, environmental collapse is going to start really registering on people. And most of all, really, the big one that powers all of the aforementioned items is energy. You need oil to create the tires, you need oil to bend the metal, you need oil to power the machines that create the cars. And this is going to be a sort of an increased collapse as we start running out of oil in the 21st century. It is now within our living lives that we will start seeing this happen. And that's when you're going to start seeing people start going off the grid. So you're going to see solar getting cheaper than oil. As oil becomes more expensive, as it becomes more scarce, as geopolitics gets in the way, you're going to also at the same time see, through the same technological innovations that we see throughout society, solar and even local wind farming become efficient enough in terms of its cost to harvesting abilities, get so cheap that the society will just simply select through, first of all, need and price, a cleaner system over the other. And then you're going to see some very interesting things happen, because then you don't really have that much of an energy industry anymore. You don't have a reliance on a body of companies who are incredible polluters and who really are, I mean, people forget oil and coal and all that is run out of a sort of a group of companies that get together and really monopolize the market and set their pricing. They do it out in the open. They're called OPEC, you know, they do it in the open. So I think it's going to be done like that. On one side, end of the economic paradigm, increased deprivation, people really feeling those social pressures, realizing that the society isn't functioning for them anymore, and so ergo it mustn't be functioning for most people. And on the other side, the sort of cost efficient as well and the technology efficient beating out our present technologies. In New York, there used to be a huge problem with horse feces. This was a huge problem, and elections were won and lost on what would be done about the horse shit problem, right? And it was so serious that if you look at New York architecture now, they all have steps that go up, that sort of they're raised up from the ground. That's because of all the horse shit. It's so deep, because horses were everywhere and they just go everywhere, that they actually built the architecture around the problem and changed it. And one day all that went away because the motor vehicle took over and the problem was gone. And that didn't take politics. In fact, no politician can actually solve that problem. So even though that is a comical example, it did get solved by the motor vehicle. Future issues are going to be solved almost accidentally through allowing technology to take its course in certain areas. I think that actually politics is ill-equipped to actually solve society's problems. If you really look at the talking points and what they're doing and what the general agenda of the day is, and even the disgraceful way that they behave in Parliament, yelling at each other, baying and braying like some kind of mad crowd.
Mr. Speaker, recently a single mother with small children came to see me in Sheffield. She had with her a bundle of letters.
Now, if we replaced every politician with actual technicians or with people who are really dedicated, like whole teams and think tanks about how to solve specific issues, then yes, you could use politics. But as I see it, wandering into a booth and ticking the name of a man you do not know or a woman you do not know every 4 years is really opting out of doing something. It's the opposite of doing something. It's the opposite of being involved in your society. It's put there, obviously, and I find this astonishing that it even still exists. It's put there to make you feel like you're in control, like you have a say, and you do not. All of our political parties are bound by the same economic laws, are owned by the same set of corporations and lobbyists and funders and background funders. Look at the Barack Obama race. This gentleman used social media in an extremely powerful way to sort of harvest micro donations. You buy your ability to run for president or prime minister. It is your wealth that puts you in charge, not your ability to solve problems. There could be somebody who could deliberately run on that platform, but lacking the money that you do, and therefore, of course, being beholden to those private money possessors who have funded you, means that you can't really pursue the goal that you actually want to. You have to pursue the goal of the sort of money possessors that have funded you. I'm sure they're all very good people, a lot of them are Christians as well, a lot of them are very religious, a lot of them are very well educated, they're not stupid people, but they are the privileged, most of them are millionaires, they are also not there to do what you think they're there to do. They are a priori completely selected for serving their corporate masters. So I do think it's going to be a mixture of a gradual realization of people that the socio-political system does not operate in the way that they think it does by voting. This is somehow about me, right? And on the other side, it's going to be problems being solved in the process through technology, and people will start realizing that technology is in fact their entire life. They'll realize that the problems that they see, the really big problems, are slowly being solved through technology, and I think we will become apolitical. I think it'll go away. So what can we do about this? What can we do about this trend towards collapse, towards automation, towards the lack of the ability for employment, towards getting out of a system that is essentially defined by the way that it sort of traps you into having to operate within it? There are many ways that we can do this. I think the most pressing level is mass awareness. Join our movement, join any movement that understands what the root causes are. And we do need a mass, I hate to say it, awakening from the sort of fog and din of what is being pushed at us as important into really reevaluating and saying, well, hang on, wouldn't it be better to do this, for example? Produce media, write things, read into this information, research it, start learning about your actual social process. I had to. Before that, I was like everyone else. I was like, well, you know, I better vote for the right party or terrible things will happen, you know. Oh, the cuts happened because of the Tories. That's what you hear. And it's completely empty rhetoric. No, the cuts happened because of the logic of the monetary system. It would have happened anyway. It doesn't matter who happens to be in a certain job in Parliament at the moment. It's nothing to do with that. There are a couple of other local things that I've come to see are very important. Since I've started looking at this information, since I've started to try and live a sustainable life, I have deliberately not bought DVDs or CDs anymore. I buy them electronically now. Why would you not? Even better, don't even buy the material. There's so many free podcasts. There's so many free movies that are made now. Search out that free media that is talking about information, because most likely they've understood that the monetary paradigm is a problem. That's why their stuff is free. And this is also user generated, so it's not going through the filtering process of the normal corporate media that is completely beholden, very much like politics is, to the corporate masters that either fund it or the advertisers that are displayed within the pages or in the ad breaks of the various outlets. So that's one of the things as well, is change your buying habits. Try and not buy from, you know, mass-produced, poisonous supermarket ware. Try and buy local. Also, very simple, get out of debt. I know it's really hard, but it's worth really concentrating on getting rid of credit cards, staying on the black side of the spectrum when it comes to your bank balance. Don't expose yourself to advertising. Do raise your children with a sense that advertising is very much geared to creating an adoption of certain buying habits. There's a reason why McDonald's has wonderful play areas and nice yellow and red signs and, you know, happy meals for children. There is a reason for that. It is co-opting the child mind that doesn't know how to fend for itself yet and doesn't suspect any chance of wrongdoing or malpractice within the advertising and product and commerce arena that it's very new to. You know, create your own compost, grow vegetables in your garden. On another level, go out to social events in your community. If and when we do start living through real difficult times, when there are, again, power blackouts and water shortages, you need that general sense of community spirit to be able to work together and not for it to be a mass free-for-all nightmare. So a lot of people think, well, you know, take it or leave it, I'm not really bothered by this information, fine, you know. But we do need to realize a few very important things. They are contingent to our survival. We are a singular organism on this planet. We are one human race. People still talk about different races of humans as if they actually exist. We are a human race, there's one race. We have a common future as well as a common heritage. We have this lot. We are on this tiny planet in a huge unforgiving space, if you like, a huge unforgiving galaxy. We do need to preserve human life. We have to get involved and change this. We have to make sure that people are served and are looked after and that we are okay. All of this information doesn't just pertain towards a mass logic of society. It's about you. It's about how you will be doing in 20 or 30 years. The Yes Men back in 2010 wrote a version of the New York Times where it was only good news, where it was the war is over and, you know, energy crisis solved and environment protected. And they dished it out over New York, you know, multiple free newspapers. And to see the look on those people's faces as they read those wonderful stories, and you could see them breaking into tears and really just so welcome to see some good news for a change. Isn't that what you would like to see?